It was the fall of 1978, deer season in particular. I lived near a very small town in Suchez, Georgia. At the time, it had a population of around 1,000 people. It's in the southeast end of the Chattahoochee National Forest. I'm an avid hunter, and I was hunting on public land in the National Forest just up the road from Suchez in an area called Cooper's Creek. I'd scouted out the area during the summer, so late July, early August, I knew where all the game trails were, and I knew where water was located, which happens to be a small creek known as Bryant Creek. And I knew where all of the ridges and gaps were. I've hunted in and around this area for years and was very familiar with the area. Well, when I finally located a good spot, or at least a spot I thought would give me a good chance of a large buck, I set up my lock-on tree stand in a tree about 12 feet off the ground. I trimmed the branches to give me some shooting lanes and basically was all set for deer season. Oh, I was hunting with a 12 gauge shotgun. Rifle hunting was not allowed in the area. So let's fast forward to early November. I've been hunting out of my tree stand about 6 times by the time this particular hunt happened. It was late afternoon, around 4:15. I wanted to get there earlier, but work held me up. We'd hired this new kid named Ryan, and that little son of a bitch had been slowing me down all week. Anyway, this was a Friday. I finished up at work, jumped in my truck, and headed out to my hunting spot. Now, this was my normal routine for a Friday afternoon during deer season, and my wife knew that I would not be home until around 8:30 that night, or even later if I bagged something. I parked my truck at the trailhead and started hiking into the woods to find my tree stand. The walk takes about 15 to 20 minutes. You want to walk pretty quickly, but not run. You don't want to make too much noise moving through the woods. You don't want to spook any of the wildlife. As I was walking to my stand, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. I mean, it was very quiet. I didn't hear any of the normal chirping or singing birds, no insects, nothing, and only a slight breeze. I thought it was a bit strange, but continued on to my deer stand. I finally arrived, climbed up, and settled in. Now, once I was comfortable, I jacked around into the chamber, put the safety on my shotgun, and began surveying the surroundings. I was looking for anything that seemed out of place. Sometimes deer bed down during the day, and you can spot their antlers above the tall grass and underbrush. As I was doing this, I began to have this ominous feeling that someone was watching me. I don't really know how to explain it other than I had this deep feeling, deep within me, in my core, in my gut. Something wasn't right. Well, I tried to ignore it for a while, telling myself to stop being such a coward. There's nothing out here but you, some deer hopefully, some squirrels, skunks, and, other little critters. As time passed, the feeling only intensified. I kept looking at my watch, wondering how much time I had left until dusk. Should I leave early? I thought to myself. Of course not. A huge deer was probably only moments away. As I was sitting there arguing with myself, I caught movement to my right side in the trees. I slowly turned my head and began looking through the tree canopy, and that's when I saw it. This is the part that still gives me the chills, even saying it now all these years later. I honestly don't know what this thing was. As I was staring into the trees, I saw what looked like a large bodybuilder, but completely blurry, moving through the trees. I could clearly see the outline of a figure, but the rest was blurry. I couldn't focus on it. It looked like a clear, gelatinous blob, but in the shape of a human, and I mean a large human. And whenever it would stop, I completely lost sight of it. It blended into the background perfectly. I just watched it for what seemed like an eternity, but in actuality it was more like 15 minutes. Its movement through the trees was effortless, like a monkey or a squirrel. It never really looked at me while I was watching, but maybe it had been before, and that's why I got the feeling someone was watching me, but I don't know. That slowly moved off, and I was scared about my walk back to my truck. So I waited for another 30 minutes. It was getting dark, and I slowly climbed out of my stand. Once I hit solid ground, I wasted no time. I sprinted all the way back to my truck. I jumped into the cab of my rusty Ford pickup truck, and my lungs were on fire. That was the farthest and fastest I'd run since basic training back in '67. I just sat there in my truck and tried to regain my breath. I drove home and said nothing to my wife or anyone else for a few weeks. As time passed, I tried to convince myself that I imagined it all, that I dozed off in the tree stand and had some sort of weird dream. But I couldn't get the idea of that thing out of my head, so I broke down and told my wife over dinner one night. She just listened and said it was probably my imagination. I later told my brother, who said something similar along the same lines. I never told anyone else, and I never hunted in those same woods again. I never even went back for the tree stand. It was like $300, and I didn't give a shit. I took a break from hunting for about 10 years and then started up again, but never in that area. I still wonder what I saw that day. I have no rational explanation. Later in 1988 or so, I saw that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, Predator. I couldn't fucking believe it. I jumped up and yelled at my wife, "That's what I saw. That looks just like it." I don't know if the writer had a similar experience as mine, and that's what inspired him to make the Predator cloak the way it did, or maybe was inspired by some other eyewitness account. But the fact is, it's exactly what I saw in the woods in northern Georgia in the fall of 1978. Now, mind you, not the reptilian-looking creature with lasers and shit, but the cloaking part. What I experienced has stayed with me all these years. The world is full of strange things. Really strange things. And some of them are out there in the woods.